If you're like me, you love to play fast. Since I was a kid, that was all I wanted to do, was play the notes, play them as fast as possible. I didn't really care about the rhythm. Maybe you're like that, maybe you're not, but you probably still enjoy to play fast or want to play faster. It's a lot of fun, but I'll tell you right now, the danger is actually not that you aren't fast enough, it's that you're going too fast. You're rushing, you're tripping over yourself, you're too excited. If you're like that, you probably have similar issues to I have, where I actually rush through things and I don't have a consistent sense of pulse, and it's really difficult for me to just slow down and control myself. And the reality is, when you listen to pieces, performances more by someone who is really controlled and relaxed, they're so much more exciting and so much more intense than somebody who's just kind of like all over the place and wishy-washy. There's no one single reason for rushing. There are a lot of different ones, and some of them might apply to you and some of them might not. But what I've found is, what I've collected more is my experience is a number of different reasons, technical reasons, psychological reasons, that cause us to do this. So today I want to tell you a lot of ways to scale back the rushing, slow down, be patient. And this is going to help you in the long run to actually be able to play faster and to be able to play it in a way that's really comfortable and really exciting. So let's dive in. The first point we're talking about today is rather self-evident, but it's important, and it's just having a poor sense of pulse. This can cause you to rush and be uneven. Some people innately have very good sense of rhythm, but even they are not perfect. And no matter who you are, you need to have a metronome on hand every time you practice. If you listen to the most precise and cleanest performers, I can guarantee you they probably use a metronome every day. I'm going to show you a very simple process for using the metronome for building your precision. You're going to start with playing one note per beat, and then once that's comfortable, you'll go up to 2 notes per beat, and then up to 4 notes per beat, like this. Start with 1 note per beat. And then we'll go to 2 notes per beat. And then 4 notes per beat. You might work on one passage for weeks or even months doing this, and you might kind of go back and forth from the different steps. You might, one day you're practicing faster, and the next day you go back to the slower ones. Don't skip the first step where you're doing note by note for each beat, because that's where you really lay the groundwork for every note getting the same amount of attention. My professor told me one time, love every note. And this is hard to do, especially when you have so many notes to play. But keeping that in mind really puts things into perspective. And if you can do that, it can help your music to really shine. So this process is going to help you to place every note exactly where it needs to be within the beat. This is just a brief overview of what that would look like simply, but we're going to do another video next time to dive into that a little bit more, so you can see how that looks a little bit with more details and more how to get there step by step through the whole process. The next issue a lot of people have, especially beginners, is that they tend to rush the easy parts, and then when it comes to the hard parts, they slow down. And this causes the whole piece to just lack a sense of consistency and continuity. It's a pretty simple fix, but it's just something you need to be aware of. So when you find the most difficult spot, whatever it is that's the hardest for you, that's going to set the tempo for the rest of the piece. You have to turn on the metronome and make sure, for me, this particular piece, it would be... So that's going to be, whatever speed I can play that part, that's going to set my tempo for the beginning. This will make sure that when you get to that spot that was really difficult, you don't suddenly go, I forget what happens before it, but then you get there and you're like, and everything falls apart. Like the rest of the piece was going fine, and then you kind of tank. So that's what you want to do, is you want to avoid that. That's going to set your tempo. Turn on the metronome. Make sure you can play through the whole piece very comfortably, and it all sounds great. I'll give you one more example with this. This is probably where you will find this the most often. It's Mozart's C major. And the reason this one is so common is because the beginning is pretty easy. As soon as you get to the 16th notes, you have problems. You'll have people playing which is way slower, and most people, when they do this, they don't even realize what's going on. Like if you start it this fast, really you need to be playing the next part, which is way too fast. So the piece really isn't meant to be that fast. And so it's pretty simple. Just turn on the metronome, make sure you find and you can do what I just did, go back and forth, make sure that the tempo is consistent. That's going to help you to play every piece, and it'll actually make sense to the listener, because if everything's in a different tempo, it just doesn't flow together, it doesn't make sense. The next issue we'll deal with is any sort of technical deficiency. Okay, when you have a technical problem, let's say your finger's not in the right spot, your wrist is too high, there's tension, whatever it is, this can actually cause you to rush, because psychologically you're trying to kind of get to the next note and to cover over the impurities, rush ahead and skip over the bad stuff. It's just a natural thing we do, and often without even knowing it and not realizing that this is because there's a problem that you need to go back and identify and deal with. Now, it's important to realize that a lot of times what happens, you have a problem and you're playing. So you rush to sort of compensate or cover up that problem. And then that rushing causes problems in your playing, which causes you to rush. And so it just kind of compounds on itself and becomes a very serious issue. So to deal with this, you need to identify what really the root of the problem is. Sometimes the root is initially rushing. So you were rushing at first, that causes technical issues. Sometimes it's just a technical issue that caused the rushing. So you want to figure out what it is, and then you want to practice. If it's a technical issue, there's a lot of things that could be said for that. But one way you can practice it is by removing time and rhythm from the equation. So you're just going note by note. So I'm not necessarily playing it in any particular tempo, but you might just each note not worry about how fast or slow you're going, and just feel the note. Be aware of the notes that feel particularly uncomfortable or tense. Now, there are a lot of issues that you could identify. We can't talk about everything today, but we have talked about these recently. So maybe your finger is not getting off the key when you're done with it. Maybe you're not balanced correctly. So we've talked about those recently, and perhaps you can check that out, and that might help you to identify some of these problems and help you to not rush quite as much. So next, I want to talk about the way that you group notes in your practicing tends to cause rushing. What I mean by grouping, some people call it chunking, is that you don't just play note by note, especially when you have a lot of fast notes. It's best to group them together into one motion with your arm and your fingers like this. So each one of those is a group. Now, sometimes the group will line up with the beat. You'll have 4 16th notes, and you'll have 4 16th notes, 4 16th notes. A lot of times passages are not quite this simple, and this is one of those cases. For example, I play the first note, and then I have a new attack on the very second note. So that first note of the group, this one, that's where I start the group, that's where I start the motion, is on the second 16th notes, not on the beat. And then the next one is the same thing, and the same thing. Then here I have one on the beat. So especially when the grouping is kind of in between the beat, it becomes really difficult to line it up properly, and that causes you to rush. What I found is we tend to rush the last note of the group. That note tends to get kind of cheated because we're eager to get to the next group. So make sure that you pay attention to that however you want to group your notes out. And if you're not so sure how this works, you're probably automatically going to be grouping based on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, which can be difficult when you get faster. You want to think about the way things should be grouped. But if that's the case, you're likely going to be rushing the 4th, 16th note of the group. And so you'll want to be aware of that particular note. 1, 2, 3, 4. That 4th note is probably going to get cheated. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So the way that we deal with this is recognizing first which notes we're likely to rush. And then what you want to do is you want to practice by freezing when you get to that note. Freeze. Freeze. Actually, I will do it differently. I would freeze here, freeze here, freeze here, freeze here, freeze here, freeze here, and on and on. And then once you've kind of gotten that into your fingers and that feels comfortable, you're going to freeze for a lesser period of time until you're not really freezing on that note, but you're just lingering a little bit longer, kind of like this. So you can hear all of those notes that I'm lingering on are the notes that I might tend to rush through. And so this is just kind of a way to sort of counterbalance your natural tendency and force yourself to do something that's awkward. And then it's a lot easier to bring back to the middle and be more precise. The last thing that often causes rushing, this is probably the number one factor, especially when you're performing, is fear. We get performance anxiety, you get adrenaline, all sense of rhythm, at least in my experience, just kind of goes out the window. And it's like, I don't even know what's happening. And then people, I've had this happen to me, they say to me afterwards, you're playing like so fast, like way too fast. And it's not really a compliment when they say that because it's fast, but it's totally uneven. And this is probably a common experience for a lot of people. So make sure that you are thinking through how to address like just your anxiety, your stress. It's good to always remember to breathe before you play. It's good to have something to anchor you. And that's one reason why it's helpful to use the metronome is before you play, instead of thinking about all the things you need to remember, just have this in your mind, which is also why it's really important to have your tempo when you're practicing it, let's say a couple weeks before your performance, that you turn the metronome on at the tempo that you plan to perform, and then kind of try to memorize that beat, whatever it is. You could even, when you're not practicing, let's say it's 120, you could just like randomly pull out your phone, metronome, and turn on the beat and just get that into your body. Remember that when it comes to performing, it often feels like all of your practice, you've been practicing for months, years, just boils down to this single moment. That's not true. It's just a small moment and it's a small step in the road, and you're going to have a lot more to come later on. So don't get too worked about one performance. There's a lot that happens. And along with that, make sure you try to perform as often as you can. That's probably the best way to deal with anxiety. It's something that doesn't really go away. It can help you in your performance to make as many opportunities as you can for performing. And in some ways that doesn't necessarily take on the shape of or scenario of being in a concert hall, but you could go to, like, maybe there's a coffee shop or there's some restaurant or those convenience stores, they have a piano or something like that. Things are busy, things are noisy, it's a different environment, and it's kind of high stress, so that can help you to get some experience under your belt. You can just ask a friend to come over and say, hey, I'm gonna give this performance, but I'm not quite ready and I wanna play for you. Play for your significant other or your family, your mom. Just bring them into the room, and even that alone is going to give you a lot of fear, which is the point, because you're going to have a lot of fear in the performance. Anything that you can do to sort of emulate a performance can help your body to get used to it. Especially if you do have a big performance, you want to set up those smaller mock performances in advance once your pieces are ready, say a month out. Getting your feet wet, getting primed and ready to go, that can help quite a bit. Finally, don't rush the ending. My students gave a recital very recently, and every one of them, they played the last chord and they were just ready to go. Don't do this. Enjoy the ending. No matter what happened, hold yourself up loud and proud. Play the chord and really enjoy it. Let the audience enjoy it too, because they need more time than you think they do. This is beautiful art, and it should really have, I guess, a nice bow at the ending. It should really, when you're done, it should really land. It should sink in what you just did. So make sure that it's beautiful and make sure that it's confident. And the other thing is the audience wants to enjoy. They want to kind of relish the ending. And you probably know the ending is coming sooner than they know. So you need to give it more time than you think to really sit and enjoy. Talking about art is really important. When we talk about the metronome and everything, it can seem kind of robotic, but that's just the structure, the foundation that we build the art upon. So make sure that you have that foundation in place. Now you can mess with the tempo here and there if you are precise, but if you don't have that precision down, then you have nothing. So that's why this is so important, is because we want to make beautiful art. So that's what we've got for today. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Happy practicing.